In 1969, Ford ripped the engine out of a Mustang, turned it around backward, and bolted it in right behind the driver, where the back seat used to be. Not a concept car, not a design study, a real, street-legal Mustang that looked exactly like every other one on the road. Almost nobody at Ford knew it existed, and when testing wrapped, Ford came within one signature of sending it straight to the crusher. This is Project LID, the secret mid-engine Boss 429. The reason it got buried isn't what you'd expect. The engineering didn't fail. It worked exactly like it was supposed to, and the results still weren't good enough. Stick around, because flipping a car's weight balance perfectly on paper doesn't always mean flipping it on the track. And to this day, nobody actually knows what happened to the car. To understand why Ford needed this thing, you have to go back to why the Boss 429 existed at all. It wasn't built for street cred. It was built because NASCAR forced Ford's hand. Chrysler had already homologated the 426 Hemi, meaning they'd sold enough street versions to make it legal for racing. The rule was simple: race it Sunday, sell it Monday. Ford wasn't letting a Hemi run away with the superspeedways, so they built the 429, a huge Hemi-headed big block, and now had to somehow stuff it into a Mustang. That somehow was the hard part. The 429 was 30 inches wide, and the Mustang's engine bay was barely 28. Ford handed the job to CarCraft, a specialty shop in Brighton, Michigan, behind the Le Mans winning GT40. They made it fit, but only through surgery, cutting out the shock towers and moving them an inch wider per side, reworking the upper control arms to match, relocating the battery to the trunk for space, and deleting air conditioning entirely because there was no room left for a compressor. Even then, the engine still sat an inch higher and an inch further forward than the one it replaced, just to clear the frame rails. That's where the real problem started. All that iron ahead of the front axle gave the Boss 429 a weight split of roughly 60% front, 40% rear. Fine for a straight-line street car, but a real liability on a racetrack. Wheel spin off the line, understeer through every corner, a chassis fighting the engine bolted into it. Ford's engineers threw bigger sway bars, staggered shocks, and heavier suspension at it, but that's damage control, not a fix. You can't engineer your way out of a car that's nose-heavy by design. So somebody at Ford asked the question nobody wanted to say out loud: what if the weight didn't have to sit up front at all? What if, instead of compensating for it forever, you moved the engine to the back? That idea turned into a program so quiet most Mustang historians didn't know it existed until decades later. Internally, it was called the LID Mustang, short for Low Investment Drivetrain, and that name says everything about how it got built. No blank check from Ford's board, no purpose-built transaxle factory, no clean sheet chassis, just whatever parts CarCraft could scavenge to prove the concept. Since nobody was signing off on a real mid-engine program for an internal experiment the public was never meant to hear about. Here's how they pulled it off. CarCraft took a standard Boss 429 drivetrain, the V8 paired with a Ford C6 automatic, and turned the whole assembly around backward. Instead of facing forward up front, the engine and transmission now sat over the rear axle, facing the tail of the car, cradled by an entirely new rear subframe built from scratch, right where the back seat and trunk floor used to be. Turning an engine around backward creates an obvious problem, though. The transmission's output shaft now points at the rear bumper instead of a differential. CarCraft's fix was a custom transfer case, similar to a marine stern drive, that grabbed the power coming out the back and redirected it 180 degrees, feeding it forward into a standard Ford 9-inch rear axle housing. One more wrinkle: a solid one-piece axle doesn't hold up well with a few hundred pounds of engine sitting right on top of it, so they converted the entire rear end to fully independent suspension, half shafts, U-joints, the works. The axle housing itself got redesigned to pull double duty, acting as both an engine mount and a mounting point for coilover shocks and new rear control arms. This wasn't a weekend engine swap. It was a hand-built, one-off rear transaxle and a fully independent rear suspension, designed on a shoestring budget, years before anything like it existed in an American production car. The kind of leap that took Chevy's engineers years of internal fighting just to get approved for the Corvette. Ford did it in total secrecy, for a single car never meant to be sold to anybody. Here's the part that's almost harder to believe than the engineering. From the outside, you couldn't tell. No futuristic show car body. It was dressed up like an ordinary 69 Mach 1 sports roof, right down to keeping the standard hood scoop purely for looks, even though there was no engine anywhere near it. Pop the hood and you'd find the battery, radiator, and AC condenser, all relocated up front, with cooling lines running the length of the car to a motor nowhere near the front wheels. Even the wheels were part of the disguise. 8 inches out back, 6 up front, reverse offset to preserve the Mustang's stock track width, then hidden under steel wheel covers pulled from a Lincoln parts bin. Park it next to a stock Mustang, and nothing gives away that the trunk floor is sitting on a 429 cubic inch V8. Even servicing it was disguised. The back seat was gone for the subframe, and the rear glass was replaced with a hinged louver panel that swung open like a hatchback lid. So, did it actually work? On paper, it should have. The numbers were genuinely impressive. That 60-40 front-heavy split from the production Boss 429 had been completely flipped, landing around 40% front, 60% rear, close to ideal for traction and cornering. And here's what makes this story better than a simple engineering win. It didn't really work, not the way anyone hoped. Wheel spin off the line did drop, since there was finally real weight over the driven wheels. But the cornering grip and lap time gains everyone expected from that near-ideal weight bias just never showed up. The mid-engine lid Mustang wasn't dramatically faster or more composed through a corner than the nose-heavy Boss 429 it replaced. Turns out, static weight percentage isn't the whole story. Where that weight sits relative to the center of gravity and how it's spread around the yaw axis matters just as much. A heavy engine sitting high and far behind the rear axle increases what's called polar moment of inertia, making the car slower to change direction, even when the numbers look perfect on paper. Reversing a bad ratio doesn't automatically hand you a good one. Sometimes you're just trading one compromise for another, with no NASCAR rule forcing a second Boss 429 into homologation and a mountain of custom engineering for a small payoff. Ford quietly killed the program. No press release, no public unveiling. It just stopped. What happened to the car after that is murky. A short piece in Motor Trend, back in December 1970, reported the sole lid prototype was sitting in a scrapyard near Detroit, waiting on the crusher. For years, that was the accepted ending. But more recent accounts, from people who say they worked at Ford at the time, tell a different story. That the car was never destroyed, that after testing, it was moved into a fenced-off holding area at the Dearborn Proving Grounds, sitting with other retired test mules before it simply vanished one day. Nobody's ever confirmed where it went. Crushed after all, sitting under a cover in a private garage around Dearborn or Allen Park right now, outside a very small circle, nobody actually knows. Project Lid never got the credit it probably deserved. This was a small team at Ford, working with almost no budget, chasing one internal question: what happens if you flip a muscle car's weight balance on its head? They got their answer. It just wasn't the one they were hoping for, and the whole project got buried right along with it. Not every dead-end experiment is a failure of engineering. Sometimes the engineering works exactly like it's supposed to, and the real world just doesn't reward it the way the spec sheet promised. If a secret mid-engine Boss 429 sitting in someone's garage right now sounds as wild to you as it does to me, drop a comment and tell me where you think that car ended up. And if you want more buried Ford history like this, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.